First of all, congratulations on your ASC Award nomination.
Thank
This
you.
is your, what is it, sixth nomination. You've won once before for the show?
I think it's my fifth because there have been 5 seasons.
Right. Oh, yeah. So even more than the seasons. Okay, yeah. Fifth nomination, and you've won once before. Yeah, congratulations on your work overall in the series and, on this most recent nominated episode.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I would love to talk a bit about what out of this season set it apart for you. What were some technical challenges? What for some things that you just really loved that you got to shoot in this episode?
Well, on paper, I thought this episode was very sort of interior bound. It's a lot of it is the night of her big premiere performance on this talk show. So it's set in her offices and in the studio and then intercut with her parents. So and other people in her lives that she's trying to get there that night for the big event. So uh and the last act is all in that TV studio. So it was quite a challenge. We had probably our longest shooting day in 5 years on the very last day of the film. Now, some people say it's because no one wanted to finish, no one wanted to say goodbye to each other, basically.
Yeah.
Um, but it was also the final sequence, which we took about a week to shoot, because it's made up of several long scenes. Uh, Unlike most of our show, it was very well covered in terms of angles because for everything Midge did on stage, we had to see the reaction of Gordon Ford, we had to see the reaction of her parents, we had to see the reaction of her husband Michael, his friends, family, just Susie. So, and we didn't shoot, even though they're in the same position for the whole sequence, we shot sections of the dialogue day by day and then shot their reactions to that every day. So every day I'd end the day turning around all the cameras onto the uh, other characters reacting to Midge. So we kind of had to go in a circle for 5 days doing this sequence. And so that was a challenge just from uh, getting the number of camera angles done in the time, but also most of the TV studio had been lit in hard spots like a TV studio for the band area, for the stand-up area, and then for the desk area. But this sequence took place all over the stage because he moves her into some area between the stand-up and the stage to do the interview that he doesn't want her to do a stand-up act. So there's an in-between area that's the two of them. And then she takes over the mic and takes over the center stage. So I had to light more evenly across the whole width of the stage for all the crisscrossing they were going to do and how they ended up. So where normally the stage is all lit with hard tungsten lights, I ended up putting two Sky Panel S120s, which are long and skinny,
Mhm.
end to end, and then having to tease it off the back curtain so it wouldn't wash out the curtain wall, colorful curtains we had. It's just so that they had some freedom to move around as actors and still look flattering in a way.
Yeah.
And then Amy came to me and asked me for her final monologue to do a moment where we do a 360-degree move and it feels like we're back in the gaslight again.
Mm.
Uh, I told her it was possible because we're in a TV studio environment. It's easy to cue lights to change the look of the room. So there's a lighting cue that happens that goes into the warm golden gaslight, shadowy feel with sort of tungsten light dimmed to 50%. But it's all manually dimmed to where the camera is pointing, so we constantly stay in a backlit angle, basically. And it's a steady cam move, so Jim McConkey had to do a very perfect circle around her as if it's a dolly move because Amy always wants the freedom then to float in a little bit or come around again, and we couldn't really do it with track or anything.
Uh-huh.
So that was a tricky lighting cue, and we actually shot it twice just because uh, we had some technical problem. The Steadicam, there was a scene in the parents' apartment the week earlier where Jim McConkey had to run backwards with the Steadicam as fast as he could as the parents rushed down the hall or something, and the back of the camera hit the wall and put a little tweak in the Steadicam that caused us to have a little tiny tremor now and then. It was very subtle, but most of the time you didn't see it. But in that perfect 360-degree move, there was just 2 or 3 moments where there's a tiny little jiggle in
Oh
it.
no, yeah.
We were like, well, can post fix that or not? And over the week, Jim had replaced every part of the Steadicam, the post, the cradle, the wave, we couldn't figure out what had gotten bent that was causing this little shimmy.
Yeah.
So basically he replaced everything on the camera, and that we did the 360 and had two little jiggles in it. And Jim was a little bit heartbroken because he wanted it perfect. And he asked Amy if there's any way he could do it again the next day with, swapping out more of the Steadicam.
Hmm.
And Amy and Rachel Brosnahan were happy to do it one more time. Rachel just loved doing that whole monologue. We just had to sort of pick the moment the lighting cue would happen and how it would come out again in terms of the dialogue. So we did it one more time the next morning, and it was nice because I had improved the lighting a little bit. And once I saw it 3 or 4 times the first time, I
Yeah.
thought it'd be better if these two lights that hit her in the back when we're looking dead on her back were more symmetrical. Sort of adjusted them the next morning and
Yeah.
improved the cue. So it's always nice to get a second pass at something like that. Uh, the other challenge in that episode was, well, there's two big oneer kind of camera sequences. There's one that's a true oneer in the taxi cab sequence where the parents can't find a cab and they end up going to Central Park West over by the Natural History Museum area
Hmm.
and see a sea of cabs, and they run in and out of cabs all in the traffic jam, trying to get one to take their money and take them to the Gordon Ford show. And Amy wanted at one point for the camera to move through a window and out another window. So we ended up using a Ronin 4D uh, in order to hand the camera through a window. And basically my key grip Charlie Sharon sat in the back seat of a cab and took it from Jim McConkey and passed it on to our B operator, Nick Nas. So Nick Nas ran up and down the second half of the shot. And then at one point she passed it back to Jim for the last part of the shot. And then he got onto a crane and it lifted him up in the air. So that was, we practiced that in a parking lot in the daytime because just choreographing it was very tricky. We had to get a bunch of cars in a parking lot and label them clearly because all the cabs look alike in the end. So we would say, this is cab one, cab two, and we kept moving around until it worked out with the dialogue. And then I had to light Central Park West for a 360-degree shot. I went out there a few times, and it was one of those things where by natural street light from the park, I would have been, at F2 at 1250 ASA or something, and I didn't really want to be wide open at a
Hmm.
high ISO, so I wanted to bring it up another stop. And the other issue I had was that the lighting comes from these multi-globe street lamps along Central Park West. And if I actually lit with that, I had no control if the camera moved and created a camera shadow on the actors from the
Hmm.
street. So I needed some way to cue out the street lamps, except if I cued them out, then Central Park, the other direction, would go dark.
Uh-huh.
So what I ended up doing was I went there 2 or 3 nights in a row, just staring at the street at night. And what I ended up deciding to do was hang sky panel S30s, which are small and square, in front of every street lamp globe. So it basically blocked the street light from hitting the actors and replaced it with the S30 light.
Hmm.
And when I would get to a point where I'd get a camera shadow, I'd cue out those S30s, and then they'd act as a flag of the existing street light, which was
Wow.
still
Uh-huh.
shining downwards and outwards the reverse way. So that was sort of my solution. The funny thing is, though, when I got there that night, I actually had more light than I realized because I didn't take into account all those times I scouted that I'd have like 60 cars with their headlights on. And so there was just a lot more light once I had a sea of cars with their headlights on than I
Yeah.
than anticipated. So it wasn't as problematic lighting wise as I thought. Then, more of the issue was with the 4D, if the headlights were too bright for the camera and things like
Hmm.
that. And it's just one or two we had to indie down or something just so that they
Yeah.
didn't burn out too much. So that was one difficult scene. And the other was this sequence in the office where Susie confronts Mike Carr about Midge being bumped off the stand-up act
Mhm.
list and is just going on as a writer for an interview. At first, Amy asked me first, she wanted to copy a shot from The Graduate where the cameras crash zooms in the wedding sequence.
Okay.
And I've always thought of it as a crash zoom on Michael on Dustin Hoffman. But when I rewatched the movie, actually the crash zoom is his point of view. It starts him tight on the window, pounding on the window, and then it cuts to his point of view of the wedding, and it does a crash zoom in on the bride uh, and the groom, and then it cuts back to a wide shot of him running into the room. So basically, we did a medium, not a close up because we don't shoot close ups. We did a medium shot of Susie pounding on the glass. We did a point of view shot that did a crash zoom on Mike Carr. And then when she comes to the room, Amy said, I want to follow her from the first floor to the second floor, which is a big bullpen with a kind of balcony that runs around all four sides of it. And she was asking me, how do we follow her from the first floor to the second floor? And obviously we could have tried to Steadicam backwards up to the staircase. But then once we were on the landing, we would be stuck sort of in the narrow landing with the actors.
Hmm.
And also there's just running backwards upstairs with a Steadicam is always difficult. So I suggested that we just crane up from the first floor, lose her in the stairwell, pick her up again at the second level on the crane. But then on the crane, we could stay outside the rail and follow her along the rail with my car. But at some point we had to get over the rail and then back up through a doorway, which required a disconnect from a Movi and a magnet. So the shot starts out with a technocrane in the bullpen and it goes up to meet Susie. And the other problem was that I didn't want the camera to have to hop over the rail to see her. So I had asked the visual effects if it was possible if we got rid of the rail on one side and the camera flew through it. If we lined it up with marks on the wall, we could
Hmm.
imagine that somehow the camera threaded the needle between two gaps in the railing, saw her. And then as it backs up again, I wanted it to back up, make sure I was above the top railing because I didn't want it to magically break through the rail that was going to be added back in CGI. So it was tricky because it was with this technocrane, we floated in. They had to lift high enough that when they pulled back with it, we were just skimming the imaginary railing on the right side that was missing. And then we were on her. We get over the second rail, we disconnect, and then Nick Nas, our operator, took over the camera, walked very fast backwards through a kind of slalom through two doorways, and then onto another stairwell where we connected again to a technocrane and took Susie and my car down the staircase very quickly. Again, it just didn't feel running backwards down a staircase ahead of them was going to work. One is it's hard to run backwards down a staircase with a camera. The other is the two of them would be too stacked to the lens if they were following each other because it's a very narrow staircase. We had to come down along the outside of the rail.
Hmm.
This required art department to extend the width of the top landing so that there was room for the camera operator and the grips to all be there and still have room for the actors on the top landing.
Yeah.
Art department extended the platform. And so in theory, this is how the shot was going to work is we got to the base of the stairs, Midge and Susie and my car would split off and that'd be the end of the shot. And we did a rehearsal a few nights before the shooting day and it was about 80% there. You know, the connects and disconnects are difficult to get perfect. But once Amy saw that it was working, she says, is there any reason we can't just keep going and go into the next scene? And the next scene was a scene in the TV studio where all the characters arrive. We see the parents arrive. We see, you know, Michael Zegan, you know, her husband Joel there, his friend Archie, Imogene. We see Susie take her position. We see the writers arrive, and she wanted to stage that as a oneer.
Hmm.
And lighting wise, I wasn't too concerned because it's a TV studio with lights rigged everywhere. I didn't think that was going to be the problem. The problem was just that Jim McConkey is at the wheels of this two techno cranes basically, and my dolly grip, Jake had to run from the first technocrane, and while it was in movie mode, run to the second technocrane and operate that one. But if we disconnect the end, Nick Nas, who was holding the movie, is stuck on the second floor landing. So I said, we need a third operator. Jim's at the wheels, Nick Nas is on the second floor. So we brought in Jeff Molstock, who's an operator I worked with on Smash a decade ago. And so he disconnected the movie the second time and then went into the TV studio. And then we did this whole 360-degree oneer for the second half. So that whole
Wow.
sequence ended up running like 2.5 minutes long, I think, or something. So those were the two big, complicated oneer sequences in that episode. Um, Besides that, I had some time of day things I wanted to create some sense of it's getting later and later story wise. Luckily, we were on the sound stages, so I could sort of go into a blue twilight in the various locations until we go
Mhm.
into night. Uh, and then the last day, we had such a long day and so many angles to shoot that I was sort of determined that I wasn't going to compromise. I didn't want to, you know, it's easy with all this floodlighting overhead to just say we're lit, we're lit, we're lit, but even though
Right.
it's not attractive or flattering, and I was determined that I was going to stop and make sure every time Rachel stopped on a mark that she was in a good key light, and even if it meant re-rigging or moving or changing a cue, I just didn't want to be rushed on because the last time I'd ever get to light Rachel Brosnahan, so I
Yeah.
knew you always get this thing on TV show or anything where you have to decide time, where to compromise and when to compromise. But you also know that when you go into color correction and editing, everyone just forgets that the day. They just think, why did you not light that better? Or why did you do that? Why is this? And it's like, well, on the day we're doing a long day and I had to
Yeah.
cut
Didn't have
corners.
time.
So as a DP, it's your job to try to know when you can get away with stuff and when you just can't get away with stuff, when
Yeah.
you just have to say, look, this is what it's going to take, And we've all been working together for 5 seasons, so everyone
Right.
trusts each other, our judgments on things like that. So, but that was sort of just an internal thing. No one questioned me how long I was taking or anything like that. But I
Yeah.
knew sometimes I think in my head, well, I could cross cover this moment, except the lighting on, her and him won't be quite as nice if I cross cover because their backlights will hit each other and all this sort of stuff. So it was just a long day of shots, and we ended up on the couch scene at the very end where Gordon Ford asks Midge to sit on the couch and interview her as a star. And I think Reed had the last shot in there, but it was, and then we had a confetti cannon go off, I think, or something, and streamers and a big party
Yeah.
after a very long day. So it was a very emotional after 5 years. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, it's such a special thing that, you shot the pilot, you shot the last episode. It's been 5 seasons of this show. Obviously with a lot of the same crew and talent. Yeah, I mean, it's what is that experience like to be so in depth on one creative project for such a long period of time and then have it come to an end?
Yeah, I've never had a series run 5 years before. Longest I've been on anything was 2 seasons of. Well, I was on 3 seasons of United States of Terra and 2 seasons of Smash, but 5 seasons is just insane. It just, it's because of a COVID year in there and everything. It was basically 6.5 years of my
Yeah.
life. We shot the pilot in the fall of 2017,
Wow.
and then picked up in the series in the spring of 2018. Or sorry, I'm going 2016. Fall of 2016 was the pilot. First season started in the spring of 2017, but then 2020 we didn't start up until almost the end of the year. We came back to work like in October, November, I think. So we lost almost a year. So yeah, it's a lot of time. It's a very emotional last episode. So it was just and I knew I was going to work. We all going off to another series together mostly um, with Amy Sherman Palladino and Dan Palladino and the same producers, but it wouldn't be the same cast. And so, I was saying goodbye to a cast that I've been working with for 6 years, and they were the most wonderful people. There wasn't, you know, they're just all wonderful and hardworking and professional and sweet natured and just lovely people.
Yeah.
Phil and Alex Borstein and Tony Shalhoub and Marin and everyone. So it was just hard to say goodbye.
Yeah. That makes sense. What's it like to be nominated for an ASC award for your last episode of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel?
Yeah, I was nominated for the first episode, the pilot, and now to be nominated in the last episode after 5 years, it's very touching. Um, it's a great honor. I mean, when I won last year for the season finale of season 4, it was one of the most important days of my life. I'd always to be honored by the ASC, which is just my peers, just means so much to me, and it meant so much to me last year. So to be nominated again is just icing on the cake at this point. I'm just so happy, because I respect the members so much, and the work is so good that I'm surrounded by. Particularly, I think this season, just television in general, is just spectacular
Yeah.
cinematography, and so uh, to be noticed and among all those great shows that have come out this year is just very moving for me. So I couldn't do that show without really talented people. I mean, I have one of the best camera operators in the world, Jim McConkey, and his brother Larry McConkey, who's retired but is getting the Lifetime Achievement Award for the SOC this year.
Mhm.
The two of them figuring out all sorts of rigs along with Charlie Sharon, my key grip. Um, and then Jenny Scarlotta, my gaffer, because to do these 360-degree shots is just a lot of work on the lighting side of it,
Right.
and to do it quickly and efficiently too is just I couldn't do it without the grip and electric team. And then Anthony Capello is just such a good focus puller. I mean, 5 seasons, and I rarely have to talk to him on the set in terms of the shots. He just nails it. He knows when to rack, and most of our discussions just become, well, maybe on this moment we should rack a little later or go on this line instead of that line. It's a creative call at that point. But in terms of just the following people, I don't have to worry about what f-stop I'm at or
Mhm.
how difficult the shot is or any of that stuff. Occasionally we just get a shot that's just so difficult to pull focus on that and Anthony's trying so hard, and I'm just so impressed with his abilities as a focus
Yeah.
puller. It's just been great. I think the hardest shot he had to do, I don't know, maybe, well, there's a couple, but one was that in season 2, the move in the switchboard room where we're going past the faces of all the switchboard operators. So that's one of the few times we're in tight close-ups because just the nature of being so close to the board and their noses. And to pull someone coming at you, but then in a moment roll back to the next person coming at you and then roll back to the next person is a sense of timing that's very difficult to work out. And yet he got it right all the time. And then the other was just this season, we had a scene on a boat in a harbor at night where at the very end, Midge gets put onto a Coast Guard boat and gets driven away. And in order to basically start close enough on her, I had to use a zoom lens and start zoomed in on her wide open. And
Oh my
she's on
God.
water on a separate boat. And then as the boat drives away, we're zooming out. And that is just a very difficult shot. There's no marks and I'm wide
Yeah.
open
Just feeling it
and the
out.
boat is
Wow.
moving all over the place. And and also the pressure is because it was the last shot of the day. So the sun's coming up.
Mm.
I actually had to digitally darken the everything because there was blue light on the water and
Yeah.
everything. Um, so that was pretty stressful for Anthony, I think, but he just nailed it all the time. So it just makes everything more possible. These scenes, these shots. it's just, it's not achievable on my own,
Hmm.
only achievable because I have people working for me that can pull this stuff off.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like an absolutely incredible team, and I'm excited to see whatever most of you go off to do now next with Amy Sherman Palladino. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.